Well, the agreement is not final. It's just a framework, but it's being called historic by supporters and condemned as foolhardy by critics. Negotiators from 6 world powers say they have come up with a plan that ensures Iran won't develop nuclear weapons for years to come. The framework cuts the number of Iran centrifuges by 2/3, from 19,000 to about 6,000. Enrichment is also curtailed. Iran can only enrich uranium to the level of 3.67%. That's below what's needed for building nuclear weapons. Another key concession is what's called the breakout time. That's the time it would take Iran to build a nuclear bomb. It's believed they could achieve that now in about 3 months. However, under the agreement, the breakout time would be lengthened to a year. Iran also agrees to give UN inspectors full access to its facilities so adherence to the agreement can be monitored. In return, the West will phase out economic sanctions. However, if Iran reneges on the deal, the sanctions will be immediately reimposed.
If Iran cheats, the world will know it. If we see something suspicious, we will inspect it. So this deal is not based on trust. It is based on unprecedented verification. And this is a long-term deal with strict limits on Iran's program for more than a decade and unprecedented transparency measures that will last for 20 years or more. And as a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran will never be permitted to develop a nuclear weapon.
President Barack Obama is saying the U.S. will always have Israel's back if Iran turns aggressive. And he points out that other U.S. presidents have signed agreements with far more dangerous foes, notably during the Cold War. But that argument isn't quieting the chorus of criticism from the Republicans in Congress. And as expected, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is strongly denouncing the potential deal.
Iran will have billions of dollars flowing to its coffers, not for schools or hospitals or roads, but to pump up its worldwide terror machine and its military machine, which is busy conquering the Middle East as we speak. The preeminent terrorist state of our time should not have access to a vast nuclear capability that will ultimately give them nuclear weapons. That's a concern for Israel, for the region, for the peace of the world.
Well, the deal has critics in Iran as well, and among Iranians who are living abroad. Dr. Marc Benhuri emigrated to the United States many years ago, and he's the author of Price for Freedom, a memoir of his family's experience escaping Iran after the revolution in the 1970s when the Ayatollahs came to power. Well, also joining us is Rise News Washington correspondent Leila Vidal. Thank you both for joining us to consider this controversial deal. Dr. Benhuri, I want to start with you. A controversial deal by many people on either side. What's your perspective and take on this?
The Iranian regime are not trustworthy regime at all. From the beginning, they lie, they cheat, they deceive. And then if that doesn't work, they play victim. And if that doesn't work, they go to terrorism. And there is no way that they would put up or they would follow anything that we signed with them. And after you remove the sanction, I mean, don't forget, Ayatollah Khamenei have a veto power. After a few months, he can say, I don't like this. You know, you already removed the sanction, and they can go ahead and do whatever they want.
Well, we don't know all the details of this deal right now, Doctor, but you would think, and I guess what you're saying, that even with certain aspects and promises of verification, this still is not a good deal in your mind.
Because they are not going to tell the truth, even from beginning. They did not tell the truth to the United Nations. They did not tell the truth to United States or the world power. Every time they cheated, they were supposed to, 3 months, they do certain thing they didn't do. They got $2 billion. And then the next extension, again, they didn't do anything. They got another $2 billion. The last one on November 24, again, they didn't do anything that they were supposed to. And they are getting $700 million a month now. And this is not the way they won't do it.
Leila, I want to bring you in on this conversation here. I think Dr. Benhuri has some good points here. I mean, even some folks, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and others, Egypt, they're kind of shuddering at the possibilities here. But President Obama says the congressional opposition also came even before they knew of the details. Is it a better deal than most in Washington perhaps might have expected?
Well, it really is. I mean, the president did a very good job of lowering expectations and then exceeding them. So, for example, most expected the total amount of fissile material that Iran was allowed to keep to be higher than the agreed upon 300 kilograms, and Iran did agree to export material, which at one point was trumpeted as a deal breaker for Iran. The other thing is that there is unprecedented access. Now they're working out the details for inspectors to make sure that Iran sticks to the deal. The last thing that I think surprised people, Julian, is the fact that Iran was insisting initially on an immediate lifting of those sanctions, and they didn't get that either.
Yeah, you know, Dr. Benhuri, you're just saying, responding and reacting to what Leila was saying here, that they won't basically heed to the parameters of this deal here. I guess the question is, if you don't have any kind of deal or a framework for a deal, and that's all this is right now, then what do you do? Do you think sanctions are the only thing that would curtail Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
Sanction was working very well. Before United States and world power, they sit, Iran was going bankrupt. There was 4 months they didn't pay the soldiers, the factory workers, and the people they were demonstrating. And $2.2 billion from National Bank of Iran got disappeared. Iranian gas company went bankrupt. They were desperate. And then we sit with a terrorist regime, sponsored terrorism all over the world. We sit on a table with them and we give them $2 billion. This was a mistake.
Okay, but perhaps we may be that might be a stalemate in terms of who thinks Iran will or will not do something. But Leila, I want to go back to you. The key thing here, I think, for many people outside of the P1+5 nations is the United States Congress. We talked about the headwinds that the president would face here. How strong do you think these headwinds are? And do you think this deal, if it does come to fruition through negotiations, could get through Congress?
Well, it's going to be tough, and some lawmakers are going to try to undermine it. That's happening now. The threat immediately for this deal is a bill to be voted on next week, mandating congressional approval of any agreement. Now, the White House says that could undermine the talks. And the big administration concern is that although the legislation is led by Republicans, there are about 10 or so Democrats already who seem to be on board. Now, it will need 67 votes because Obama will, without a doubt, veto it. And Republican staffers I spoke with today say they are counting about 64 votes so far, so you can bet there's going to be some White House arm twisting next week. It's going on now. There's also the question of sanctions. Now, the White House is breathing a sigh of relief after 2 senators withdrew their sanctions bill, saying they will wait until June 30th, and of course that's the deadline for the final deal. But Julian, there's a lot of money behind undermining this deal. For the first time in 10 years, the Republican Party is getting more money from wealthy pro-Israeli donors than Democrats. And these are hawkish donors. They're very aligned with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who of course is a staunch opponent of an Iran nuclear deal. And they'll be pushing that here in the United States.
Once again, money at the bottom of everything, it seems like, in this country and indeed this world. But of course, our eyes will still be on this. It's still a framework right now. A lot needs to be said and done. Leila, you're going to keep on with us here, but Dr. Benhuri, we've got to go. We've run out of time for this segment.
One more thing.
Real quickly.
Right. That the Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Egypt, and UAE and Oman, they all would want to have an atomic bomb also.
Okay, but
and then we have a chaos in Middle East.
There seems to be chaos right now, but we're going to keep our eyes on it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Leila, I want to turn to you and another development in Washington, D.C. The U.S. Supreme Court setting free a man who was on death row for almost 30 years. We've heard this time and time again. Anthony Ray Hinton was convicted of murder in 1987. But the gun used in the crime was not tested until recently, and it turns out not to be the gun found in Hinton's home. Leila, why did this take 16 years to get the case overturned?
Well, the quick answer is that for 16 years, the state refused to retest the evidence, even though that retest by the civil rights attorneys taking his case found that those bullets found at the scene could not be a match to the gun that he was accused of using. And it's really stunning that this innocent man spent 30 years behind bars, lost 30 years of his life, and that is the question for the U.S. justice system. I mean, even in the beginning, look, there were no fingerprints or eyewitness testimony in his case initially, and you actually see this in a lot of cases where Despite exculpatory evidence, the courts refused to allow them to be reintroduced. And advocates are saying there are hundreds, perhaps thousands, of innocent people behind bars. They say imprisoned because of race, poverty, inadequate legal assistance, prosecutorial indifference to innocence. And they say that creates a textbook for injustice here.
I got to say, we got to move on to another subject here, but I just want to read something to you. I think this is very, indeed, something people should know. Since 1973, over 140 people, Leila, have been released from death row with evidence of their innocence. Since 1973 to 1993, 3 exonerations per year. 2000, 2011, 5 exonerations per year, and I guess that's increasing. So that's something certainly to look at. But on another topic here, President Barack Obama heads to Panama for a regional summit, and people will be wondering whether he'll embrace Cuba's leader, Raul Castro. Your thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, about 2 years ago, they shook hands in South Africa. That created shockwaves. Then we had the attempt to reestablish diplomatic relations. So we don't know if there'll be that Gorbachev-Reagan hug, but officials are telling me that that's probably not going to happen. What they are saying is that there will be what they call an interaction with President Castro at the summit and President Obama. And even that is historic.
Indeed, indeed. Leila McDowell, as always, thank you for your insight as well as reporting.
You bet.
All right. Coming up next, there are big challenges in 2 African countries. Facing them are a longtime leader as well as a brand new one. Well, those stories and much, much more when Arise Review returns. Stay with us.